Imagine stepping onto an island where the food chain is upside down, where humans shrink, giant birds stalk the forests, and armored dragons patrol the rivers like silent executioners. Now imagine this, a tiny human species barely 1 meter tall trying to survive in this nightmare built by evolution itself, and then disappearing so mysteriously that their final chapter still keeps scientists awake at night. Welcome to Flores, an island where nature rewrote the rules and where a missing branch of humanity may still whisper through legends, bones, and shadows. If you were to sail through the Indonesian archipelago 100,000 years ago, Flores would look like nothing more than a rugged green shape rising out of the sea. But the moment you set foot on it, you'd feel something was wrong. Not immediately. Nature is subtle, but within minutes, the island would begin revealing its secrets. The trees would seem too quiet, the air too heavy, the shadows too alive. Flores wasn't just another patch of land, it was an evolutionary pressure cooker, an isolated world where nature took every rule of biology and twisted it into something new. Large animals shrank to survive, small animals grew into giants, and somewhere in that strange equation, a tiny species of human emerged. When archaeologists entered Liangbua Cave in 2003, they expected pottery, stone flakes, maybe signs of early modern humans passing through. They never expected a nearly complete skeleton of a person, so small it almost looked impossible, barely a meter tall. Slighter than a child, yet clearly an adult. A skull with a brain the size of a grapefruit. But shaped like ours, human, but not human. Familiar, but unsettling. They named her LB1, the Little Lady of Flores. But the island had more surprises waiting. Soon, researchers uncovered bones from more than a dozen individuals, revealing not a random case of dwarfism, but a species, Homo floresiensis. A people who lived, hunted, raised families, laughed, feared, and died, all while surrounded by animals large enough to reshape the meaning of danger. Flores had forged a new kind of humanity, small, efficient, resilient, and the deeper scientists dug, the clearer it became. This island didn't just host a species, it hosted a story that shouldn't have been possible. At first, many scientists refused to believe what they were seeing. A tiny human species surviving until just 50,000 years ago? That was uncomfortably recent, close enough to overlap with Homo sapiens, close enough that our ancestors might have walked past them in the forest, stared into their eyes, and wondered if they were looking at a child, a spirit, or something else entirely. Skeptics argued that the bones belonged to modern humans with genetic disorders. But Flores didn't care about their arguments. The island had preserved the truth perfectly, layer by layer. Stone tools scattered like breadcrumbs through time, a jawbone here, a forearm there. Footprints, hearths, animal bones with butchery. Marks, evidence of a people who lived generation after generation in the shadow of predators. And then came the geological clues. Flores had always been isolated by deep ocean trenches. Even during the Ice Age, when sea levels dropped dramatically, the island never connected to the mainland. Which meant one stunning thing: Homo floresiensis didn't drift onto the island by accident. They crossed water, they navigated, they planned. The implications were enormous. Not only were these tiny humans toolmakers, they might have been the Vivayan, first in the entire region to venture into the open sea. Long before Homo sapiens mastered navigation, these 1 meter tall explorers may have launched simple rafts toward unknown horizons. And as researchers pieced together their tools, simple stone flakes sharpened by practiced hands, they realized something else. A small body didn't mean a simple mind. The hobbits of Flores understood fire, hunting patterns, and how to survive. On an island filled with dangers too large to outrun, the picture was becoming clearer. Flores wasn't a curiosity, it was a forgotten chapter of human evolution, written in miniature. To understand Homo floresiensis, you have to understand the island that sculpted them. Flores wasn't generous, It wasn't forgiving. It was biologically speaking a trap. Once a species arrived, it couldn't leave. The surrounding waters were deep, unpredictable, and merciless. Food was limited. Large mammals struggled to survive. In a place like this, evolution worked like a ruthless editor, trimming away anything too big, too slow, or too demanding. Elephants shrank into pony-sized stegodons. Rodents ballooned into cat-sized giants. Reptiles thickened their hides and sharpened their senses. Everything was being resized, redesigned, recalibrated, and humans were no exception. If the ancestors of Homo floresiensis truly descended from Homo erectus, strong, long-limbed explorers, then Flores reshaped them across countless generations. Smaller individuals needed less food. Smaller bodies lost heat more efficiently in the damp forests. Smaller frames were easier to sustain during droughts or volcanic years. Step by step, century by century, nature sculpted an entirely new human species, one perfectly tuned to scarcity. But Flores didn't just shrink their bodies, it heightened their instincts. Their world was filled with ambush predators. Forests where every rustle meant danger. Rivers patrolled by giant lizards. Cliffs guarded by enormous birds. In this environment, intelligence was a survival tool sharpened by constant pressure. These hobbits carved tools not out of ambition, but necessity. They learned to coordinate hunts. They navigated treacherous terrain. They adapted to threats most humans today can't imagine. And yet, despite everything stacked against them, they lasted. They endured for almost 1,000,000 years, longer than Homo sapiens has existed. Flores wasn't just a place they lived, it was the force that forged them. If you woke up as a member of Homo floresiensis, your day would begin with a contradiction. You lived in a small body, but in a world built for giants. Every sound mattered. Every shadow meant something. Survival depended on noticing the danger before it noticed you. The forest canopy above you would be alive with movement, branches shaking under the weight of massive birds. Not the kind that chirped and fluttered, but towering storks nearly twice your height, with long spear-like beaks capable of ending a life in a single strike. Just leaving your shelter meant calculating where they might be watching from, but the forest floor held terrors of its own. The rustle of leaves might be a harmless rodent, or a Komodo dragon moving silently through the underbrush. A 3-meter armored reptile that could kill with venom, teeth, or sheer brute force. To a hobbit barely 1 meter tall, a Komodo wasn't a lizard. It was an apex predator, a dinosaur that evolution forgot to retire. And yet, Flores' tiny humans didn't spend their lives hiding. They foraged, hunted, explored. They carried simple but effective stone tools, sharp flakes perfect for opening shellfish, cutting vines, or processing meat. Their small groups moved quietly, reading the terrain the way a modern human reads a map. Riverbanks were checked for tracks. Tree roots were scanned for fresh scratch marks. The forest was a language, and they understood every sentence. Even their sense of community was shaped by danger. You didn't wander alone. You traveled in groups, relying on shared eyes and shared instincts. A warning grunt from one could save everyone. A misstep from one could doom the entire group. This wasn't ordinary life. This was life beside monsters, a constant chess match where every move mattered. Imagine crouching in tall grass no higher than your shoulders, clutching a wooden spear hardened in fire. Your group moves silently, 6, maybe 7 of you, each one scanning a different angle. You're not chasing a giant, you're chasing dinner. And dinner on Flores usually meant rodents the size of house cats, crustaceans from the shore, or small reptiles hiding under stones. For Homo floresiensis, hunting wasn't a show of strength, it was a show of precision. A misstep scared prey away, or worse, attracted something far more dangerous. They learned to move like shadows, to take advantage of morning light, to avoid hunting at dusk, the hour when Komodo dragons began to stir. But the deadliest moments weren't during the hunt, they came after, once prey was down. The smell of blood became a beacon. Komodo dragons could detect it from kilometers away. Giant Storks watched from the treetops, waiting for movement. Even vultures bigger and bolder than today's circled overhead. So the hobbits worked fast. Every cut was practiced. Every motion was rehearsed from childhood. A sharp stone tool sliced through hide. Another scraped meat from bone. Someone always kept lookout. Bones were cracked open for marrow. Nothing was wasted, not because of reverence, but because leaving scraps behind meant inviting predators to your doorstep later. And yet, despite the danger, there were triumphs. Some days you found a nest of giant rats, enough food for the whole group. Other days, you stumbled upon a stegodon carcass, perhaps already weakened by age or trapped in mud. That meant a feast. A celebration, but also certain risk. Large carcasses drew the dragons first. On Flores, hunter and hunted were never separate roles. They were the same job, just different outcomes. In a world filled with predators that could end your life in a heartbeat, intelligence wasn't optional, it was a survival instinct. And for Homo Floresiensis, being smart didn't mean building cities or painting cave murals. It meant something far more primal, learning how to stay alive when everything around you was bigger, faster, or deadlier. Their tools reflected that reality. Flores hobbits didn't craft elegant blades or intricate spearheads. Instead, they produced simple, brutally effective stone flakes, sharp enough to butcher prey, shape wood, open shells, or turn a branch into a spear. Their craftsmanship wasn't about complexity. It was about speed. You needed a tool you could carve in minutes, not hours, especially when danger could arrive at any moment. Their spears were almost certainly wooden, hardened by fire, long enough to keep a predator at distance. A dozen coordinated. Hobbits with spears might not kill a Komodo dragon, but they could fend one off, buy enough time to escape, or distract it long enough to grab fallen prey. Survival depended on cooperation, and that cooperation extended into every part of their social lives. They slept in groups. They foraged in groups. They crossed riverbeds in groups, never alone. A lone hobbit wasn't brave. It was doomed. Their world demanded constant awareness. You needed to know which ravines held snakes, which trails stank of reptile musk, which clearings were used by giant storks. Children learned these rules before they learned to speak clearly. One mistake taught the lesson in the harshest way possible. Yet within this relentless pressure, the hobbits thrived. They adapted, innovated, and passed knowledge through generations. And the island, the same island that tried to kill them, became a home they understood better than any other species alive at the time. Tiny bodies, huge predators, but even bigger resilience. For nearly 1,000,000 years, Homo Floresiensis ruled their strange little world, not as conquerors, not as apex predators, but as survivors. Then something changed. Something walked in from the sea. Around 50,000 years ago, the island of Flores experienced a moment unlike anything in its history. The arrival of Homo sapiens, tall, broad-shouldered, armed with advanced tools and fire-hardened strategies that had been sharpened across continents. To a population of 1-meter-tall island dwellers, these newcomers must have seemed like giants, silent, unfamiliar, unpredictable. We don't know exactly how they met. There are no paintings, no bones piled in battle layers, no clear proof of war or peace. What we do have is something else. Timing, right after Homo sapiens appear in the region. The archaeological record for Homo Floresiensis goes quiet. Their youngest tools date to around 50,000 years ago. Their last known bones just a little older, almost as if their story simply stops. Did modern humans outcompete them for food? Did diseases carried by sapiens sweep through the small island population? Did resource pressure break their delicate balance with Flores' ecosystem? Or did something darker happen? It wouldn't be the first time our species erased another. Neanderthals vanished after contact with us. Denisovans retreated into genetic shadows. Wherever Homo sapiens walked, other hominins tended not to stay for long. For Flores' tiny inhabitants, the arrival of tall, powerful outsiders could have been a shock. Their population was too small to survive. Yet disappearance isn't always silence. Sometimes it leaves echoes, and on Flores, those echoes came in the form of stories whispered long before science caught up. Long before archaeologists ever set foot in Liangbua Cave, the people of Flores were already telling stories, strange stories. Stories about a small, hairy, human-like creature that lived in the forests, stole food from village huts, and whispered. In its own peculiar language, they called them Ibu Gogo. For centuries, the Nage people described these beings as about a meter tall, with large mouths, flat noses, and long arms. They said the Ibu Gogo could mimic human speech badly, but enough to unsettle anyone who heard it echo through the night. Some tales even spoke of children disappearing, only to escape later by outsmarting the little creatures. At first glance, it sounds like mythology, but then came the discovery of Homo floresiensis. The resemblance was too uncanny to ignore. Before the skeletons were found, these myths were assumed to be exaggerated stories about monkeys. But after 2003, scientists began to look at them with new eyes. The timing was eerie. The details were specific, and the legends existed long before modern anthropology even knew about Flores hobbits. According to the Nage, the Ibu Gogo vanished. In the 1600s, burned alive when villagers sealed them inside their cave. That part likely never happened. But what if the story itself preserves a much older memory? Human cultures can pass down oral histories for thousands of years. Australian Aboriginal groups still remember coastlines from 10,000 years ago. So why couldn't the people of Flores remember a tiny human species that lived alongside their ancestors? Maybe the Ibu Gogo weren't mythical creatures at all. Maybe they were the final echoes of Homo floresiensis. Their shadows preserved not in fossils, but in memory. But legends aren't the only mystery. Science has one last question, and it's the most haunting. The deeper scientists dug into Flores, the stranger the questions became. Not just how Homo floresiensis lived, not just why they vanished, but something far more intimate. Did they leave a trace inside us? We know our species mixed with Neanderthals. We know we mixed with Denisovans. Both left genetic fingerprints scattered across modern human populations. So when researchers uncovered the tiny bones of Flores hobbits, the next logical question was unavoidable. Could Homo floresiensis have interbred with Homo sapiens? Genetically, it wasn't impossible. They weren't animals, they were human. Different, yes. Small, yes. But cognitively capable and physically compatible enough that hybridization couldn't be ruled out. The hard part was proving it. Scientists tried extracting DNA from the Flores remains. But the tropics are relentless. Heat, moisture, and time shredded the genetic material until nothing readable was left. The bones held stories, but not the one coded in nucleotides. Still, the question refuses to die. Some anthropologists point to physical traits in certain Flores populations, subtle features that don't quite match Homo sapiens. Others note that oral histories, like the Ibu Gogo stories, may hint at generations of interaction before extinction. And a few researchers wonder whether future technology might reveal tiny genetic ghosts hiding deep within modern genomes. If even a fragment of Flores DNA exists in living people, it would mean the hobbits never truly vanished. Part of them would still be walking in the world quiet, hidden, passed down through blood instead of bone. And if not, then their disappearance becomes even more haunting. An entire human species, gone without a burial, without a trace, without a final witness to remember their last day on Earth. But Flores keeps secrets, and somewhere beneath the roots and volcanic stone, more bones wait for sunlight.